Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMann and Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMann and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
So, thanks for joining us today. Anthony Paluska, Dean McMann, Consultants Way, and we're going to be talking with one of my dearest, longest friends, Bob Wright. Bob is, so many things, but Bob, to me, is the guru of how technology firms should position themselves in the world so that they have, to Bob's point always, their own place in the room that's unique and different from everybody else. So Bob, introduce yourself, tell us some stuff about you, and then we'll move on to some meaty topics today.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity. And the kind introduction. My name is Bob Wright, and I'm a partner at a consulting firm, a very specialized consulting firm. We're in the Bay Area, called Firebrick. And all we do is one thing. We do B2B tech, and specifically our core competency is positioning. So as you mentioned, Dean, we get involved when B2B tech companies want to hop out of just talking about features and functions to move to more of a buyer-centric conversation when they need clear differentiation. And also when they want to hop up to more of an executive level business conversation. And we take companies through executive teams through an industrialized process. And what pops out of them is not only a position strategy, but a narrative that more clearly articulates the transformational value of the company and its products, and more important, its relevance to their target buyers. And it's all in the service of driving revenue and all in the service of driving category leadership and valuation. That's what we do.
And Bob, I got to tell you, you guys just unbelievably fantastic at that. I mean, whenever anybody wants to know literally anything about it, and you have even crossed over to some of the big enterprises that are not West Coast that M&R works with. So, it's just great. I'm so glad everything's working out so well. We'll get to your new vineyard here in a little while. No, I'm just kidding. Here in a little while. But listen, what we wanted to, you have the pulse of the SaaS industry. And today we want to talk a little bit about how you see the stages of that going, what happens after the land grab. So if you don't mind, do a little introduction on, the state of the industry, the journey they all go through, and then we'll jump off into, a lot of Q&A.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say, Dean, that SaaS or subscription businesses, or recurring revenue businesses, really taken over the world. Not only the B2B tech world, but also the general industrial business. And the reasons are multiple. First off, a recurring revenue stream is a really, really nice to have, particularly from a valuation and growth perspective. And also from a consumption model, it's a lot easier it's a lot less risk for buyers, for example, to subscribe to a subscription, and that they can get out of within a year. And also, I think a lot of consumers are frankly used to buying subscriptions. So there's been a huge movement to the SaaS recurring business model. What's happened is that initial movement to SaaS caused a land grab where every, at least in our world, every B2B tech company was just trying to acquire customers. It was all about customer acquisition, no matter the cost. And and as a result, these companies were being rewarded on ACV and ARR, and their valuations were reflected that. The market's fundamentally shifted right now. We've moved into more of a tightened buying climate, and as a result, there's been a fundamental shift from ARR and a land grab mentality to actually NDR, net dollar retention. And specifically, it's about really sustainable growth, and specifically moving from the land grab to actually how do I do an expansion motion and drive CLV across the customers that I've acquired over the last number of years. So there's been a fundamental shift, again, from acquiring new customers to a new motion about how do I drive efficient growth by expanding the existing customer base and driving customer lifetime value by driving services and additional products to the install base.
So if you look at that change, and that's a large group of the people who provide SaaS, right? There's always new players, but a large group. How does that affect our marketplace, which is the PS organizations?
Well, it fundamentally changes the role of the PS organization. Actually, PS becomes a central role of revenue in a company. It's no longer a sideshow, so to speak, for these product companies, but PS becomes a new role where it's actually responsible for not only just simple implementation and maybe consulting services, but also PS is now being responsible for driving that, creating the great experiences that's going to drive that expansion motion and drive CLB. So they've now actually shifted to a new role of not only just supporting a product, so to speak, but actually being a key driver of CLV for many of these SaaS firms. And as a result, the PS function has to fundamentally change not only its role, but the type of people that are typically hired and their function within the organization.
Yeah, I want to come back to the type of people within the professional services group in just a second, but okay, we're beyond the land grab. You talked about these organizations that are growing and expanding and trying to just expand their footprint within their existing customer base. What separates those that are successful and unsuccessful in that expansion mindset? Because it's a very different motion.
Well, I think there's number one. I think you have to recognize it is a very different motion. So the companies I've seen that are very successful in driving CLV and NDR actually run three different businesses. They run an acquisition business, they run an upsell CLV business, and they run a renewal business. To me, those are three completely different businesses that should be run very differently, incented differently, and also staffed very differently, and their roles are completely different. But the combination of those is really going to drive the NDR evaluation and future growth of the company. So that's probably the biggest change that I've seen is a recognition that now SaaS companies are actually running three completely different businesses, and they're starting to manage those businesses. And of course, PS has to play a central role, not only in renewals, but also in that upsell business as well. And as we've shifted to driving CLV, actually the acquisition business is less emphasized, and the land grab, and the more emphasis is placing on the upsell and renewal to stop that churn, but also to drive, again, additional products and services in the install base.
Yeah, from your vantage point, just help categorize where the market's at in that evolution of both understanding and moving their business there. So, right, give us some broad-based percentages on organizations that, okay, they now accept that they're in three different business models and they have to run those concurrently. And so there's probably a percentage there. And then how many have actually gotten there
across the chasm?
Yeah, gotten there successfully.
Well, I don't even think a lot of companies recognize, frankly, that they're running three different businesses. That's the first thing. It's the recognition you have a problem, and then you got to do something about it. So I think on that curve, I think a lot of companies, and again, I'm not talking about probably the category leaders all recognize that, but the majority of companies don't recognize you're running three businesses. They're still trying to do a land grab type of business model, go to market model, and then try to shoehorn an existing PS organization into upsell and renewals, and it just doesn't work, right? It's not designed for that, and they're completely different go-to-market models. So I feel a lot of companies are very early on that journey, and there's huge upside if companies can make that shift and turn and drive the expansion motion and the renewal motion from a completely different mindset, if you will.
Do you think, Bob, we have forever tried to get people to understand complex business. Do you think that to get there, a lot of them are going to have to change their executive group?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it just requires a completely different mindset. The call center person that's waiting for a call, a support caller, an implementation person that's going out to implement some software, that's a different kind of person than somebody that is consulting a company on, first off, making sure they understand the value that they're getting from their current investment in the software, but also a consulting of taking the customers on a journey, if you will, and added value and transformation value and more products and more services that's going to deliver that value. That's a completely different selling value proposition and a completely different type of person. So I think the old school support, implementation, that's gone, right? And I think it requires a completely different executive mindset, more of a growth mindset, but also shifting to more of a consultant type of sell. Understanding that implementation and the tackling has to be done, but it's a significantly more sophisticated organization that's being called for to actually drive those kind of growth rates.
Yeah, so let's use that as a topic to pivot a little bit into your area of expertise, in particular around positioning. So this shift away from acquisition due to both some relationships, but a lot of the feature function positioning that drove a lot of the conversations initially to the outcome focus that professional services helps to drive and to complete that story around. How do you all view the overarching problem and topic of positioning and helping an organization shift its mentality of, I can't just talk about my product anymore, but now I have to be talking more about the value and the outcomes, and just start at a high level, Bob.
Yeah, which is y'all's expertise, Bob. So when does that really become meaningful as that company makes a journey to running the 3 different businesses?
Well, I think it's becoming really meaningful right now because what's happened in a tighter buying climate, there's fewer buying cycles that are available. So what's happened, you got a bunch of desperate vendors that are out there chasing fewer and fewer buying cycles. And the power has fundamentally shifted to the buyer. So by the time you even hear of a signal, if you will, the buyer's probably already made his decision. So what's happening now is you can't get by with a feature function, feature rich conversation anymore. A glazed look has set in with the buyers. It's not moving the needle. And, before when there was a land grab, it didn't even matter. You just threw stuff out there and people would buy. We're in a completely different buying climate right now. So what we're seeing is that positioning actually has become a CEO initiative as a lever that the CEO can use to drive significant growth level, improve your win-loss ratio, right? Turn medium intent buyers actually into real buyers. On the acquisition side, again, improve your win-loss ratio and actually command a premium average selling price of the deal. What's also important, though, is also from a positioning perspective, when you do the acquisition, you got to set the expansion up right away. And that's really important. And the way to do that is we have a framework for a journey. We're taking it. First off, I think it's really important not to sell features, but to sell the problem. Sell the problem, not the product. What is the problem that you solve? Buyers buy from problems. So what's the big, hairy, multi-million-dollar executive level problem you solve? And then can you build a case that your unique combination of differentiators solves that big, hairy problem? But then what's really important is to take buyers on a journey. Maybe it's a 5-step journey, and companies are in the hell part of the journey right now, or quickly moving to stage 2, and then stage 3, 4, and 5. Show them a promised land, and that promised land is the expansion journey, but it's set up right away as a way to differentiate not only the existing products and capabilities, if you will, but also to really set up that expansion motion right from the beginning. And what we're seeing is, and particularly in this tight buying climate, and a shift to, again, the NDR, that's what the winning companies are doing is selling the product, taking the customers on a promised land, and really articulating the journey that sets the expansion up right away.
Yeah, that's great. Why do you think the buying climate has changed so much?
Higher interest rates, inflation, right? Uncertainty now in the economy, the political environment, supply chains are disrupting. And I think what's happened is nobody wants any more tech. Execs don't have any more tech. So you got to have a really good reason. And they're trying to actually get rid of more tech and reduce their cost structures. So I think, but again, it's different. At the same time, we got something like AI that's threatening to explode and disrupt every single industry. And everybody's trying to figure out, well, what do I do about AI? So there's also, at the same time, there's a tight buying climate. There's these AI native companies and the whole AI inflection point that's happening that's really also fueling a different kind of growth as well. So it's just a really interesting time in the marketplace. I think there's a satiation of technology, and I think there's an economic climate. But at the same time, there's the AI opportunity and the inflection point that's accompanying the convergence of those two is really creating quite an interesting market.
Let me say that back in terms that we would use from our industry and make sure I'm grabbing this. One is we are tired of buying tech. We are smarter about buying tech. We've been down hey, we used to own it and you turned it into a SaaS on me, so I just keep paying. The last 5 things I bought maybe didn't work out like promised. You're not getting more sophisticated. Okay, we got that going on. And yet we have this very interesting new wave, right? Which tech loves waves, right? Get off premise, do this, go to the cloud, okay, now it's AI. So you have both a resistance, but this yet another thing I have to figure out how to buy. And that makes it fun because you're going to have winners and losers. And I would say a lot of the winners and losers are about managing your company better, right? Your point about the 3 and getting good positioning that differentiates you. So it's a great climate for you guys and it's an interesting climate, but we're going to have winners and losers.
Yeah, it's just like any other inflection point. I don't think this is a blip. This is a fundamental inflection point, just like cloud was a fundamental inflection point. And any inflection point brings a new class of category leaders, and the legacy ones go away. And not very many legacy companies can make that transition. So what's happening now is everybody is jumping on the AI bandwagon. We got the advent of all these AI native companies that are threatening the very existence of the traditional cloud vendors. But the great AI washing is upon us. Everybody says they have AI, blah, blah, blah. So how's a buyer supposed to sort through all this? So from a positioning perspective, it's important to have an AI message, but you got to do it smart. It's just not about AI for AI's sake. AI to solve a problem. Specialized AI based upon purpose-built data. Name the data, name the AI, because it's specialized, all in service of solving, again, a buyer problem. And that's the companies that have a winning AI strategy and a winning AI position, rather than just putting AI on the front of their products and saying, we're an AI company now. It's just not working.
Yeah. So one more question, and then we're going to move to things you'd like us to take away with this. What do you think about the advent of DeepSeek does to that AI journey?
Well, I think it fundamentally lowers the cost structure required, right? And, again, it's a disruptive, but we're in the very, very early stages of AI. Most companies are just trying it out. I think nobody, what's the governance model required for it, right? And there's a lot of risk and exposure that companies will have, not only software companies, but any company using AI, if it's uncontrolled and particularly around data. My goodness. So we're just in the very early stages. Everybody's trying to figure it out. It's going to be DeepSeek now, to be something else next year. And we're going to continue seeing AI innovation within the space. But I think what it does is it fundamentally lowers the cost structure. You don't need these, huge data centers and processing power, if you will, to process these models, large language models, which is very, very interesting. But it's just going to be, maybe it'll make AI more affordable and ubiquitous to everybody. But again, it could be just more noise. I don't know, right? And if you're any buyer, if you're an executive buyer, really, do you really? I'm trying to run a business. Do I need to know about DeepSeek? I don't know. So I think it's the opportunity for at least tech companies to actually provide have a clear viewpoint, provide clear direction to companies on and give them a success model for their AI strategy, right? And it's an opportunity for sure within our industry.
Yeah, Bob, one final thing for me before we have you wrap here, because I want to make sure you have an opportunity to talk through this, because as we've worked together in the past, it's the piece that always has stuck with me, and it's this concept of owning your corner of the room and your position in the room. And we see so many organizations, as I'm sure you do, that want to be all things to all people and don't want to rule out potential customers, and so because of that, they end up being generic,
just mush, and no clarity.
Yeah. So I mean, you've been talking about this for a long time. You were on the leading edge of anybody that I've heard, like really on the focus is what's really important here. So anything you care to talk about on this topic, I just love the audience to hear your perspective here.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I came out of B2B sales. When you're in sales, you call on anything that moves, right? Just to make your number. That's the wrong strategy for any kind of company that's trying to build a category leadership. It's really, really important that there's a couple of key principles in positioning that are really driving and accelerating growth and building category leadership. Number one, you have to really identify your next set of buyers. Not who you sold of last year, not the year before, but where's the revenue growth going to be and who are those buyers? They may look very different than who you sold 5 years ago. So really getting clear about who are your next set of buyers, where the revenue growth of the company is going to come from, and making sure you have a positioning strategy and story and narrative that really resonates with those buyers. I think we're just stuck with the success of our past a lot of times. And we don't recognize that the market, the buying climate, and the buyers have fundamentally shifted. So number one, get really, really clear about who is the next set of buyers. Where's the revenue growth going to come from? Number two, you got to sell a problem, not the product. Can you own a multi-million-dollar executive level hair on fire problem? The biggest competition right now in B2B sales is do nothing. Status quo is the biggest competition. So the only way to get buyers off the status quo is for pain. You got this, the convergence of these market dynamics is causing you, Mr. and Ms. Buyer, this big pain. And we call it the XYZ crisis. And you know what? If you don't solve it, you will get fired. It's got to be that kind of urgency. So again, understanding who your next set of buyers are and really owning a problem and sell the problem, not the product. The second thing is it's really, really important to have a viewpoint. And a lot of times tech companies are coming in just selling products and features. Why don't you bring an executive something new they haven't thought about? It might be about the problem, right? Here's the big problem. You got symptoms of this. Oh, yeah, we got this problem. You're right. Well, here's your success criteria for solving this problem. Why don't you take that to the board, right? And give them something new, or here's a new way to look at the problem. So having a viewpoint. Salesforce does a brilliant job that every single year they have a different viewpoint that they articulate. And it's all about making their buyers a hero, right? So again, who are your next set of buyers? Own a problem, have a viewpoint that makes your target buyer a hero. And then, as you mentioned, the corner of the room. Imagine if the room you're sitting in right now is the market category that you compete in. And your buyers walk into that room and you and all your competitors are stuck in the middle of the room. Well, what's the buyer? Everybody looks the same. Well, what's the buyer going to do? Number one, they might not make a decision because they can't figure out the difference between anybody, or they're going to go with a brand name company. Hell, everybody looks the same. I'm just going to go with Google or Salesforce or a big player. So if you're an SAP or a Salesforce or Google, you want everybody to look the same. Your position strategy is, I want to commoditize the market and everybody to look the same. For every other tech vendor, that's a bad place to be. What you want to do is when the buyer walks into that room is you own a very clear, distinct corner of the room. And likewise, you box your competition in other corners. Oh, Mr. and Ms. Buyer. Oh, that company, great competitor. They're over in this corner there for a different kind of buyer. Oh, competitor. My other competitor, love those guys too, but you know what? They solve a completely different tactical problem, yesterday's problem. You, Mr. and Ms. Buyer, you've got this big, hairy problem, and that's why we sit in this corner of the room, and we're for you, and that's what we're all about. And so help the buyer sort it out by owning a very clear, distinct corner of the room. So I would say understand your next set of buyers and who they are, make sure the position resonates with them, sell the problem, not the product, have a viewpoint, take a stand, right? And also own a very clear, distinct corner of the room. And then finally, I'm on a mission. Get rid of these buzzwords that mean nothing. Flexible, comprehensive, easy to use, even AI, collaborative, a glazed look is set over with our buyers. These words mean nothing anymore. Agility, that's a big one. Come up with some fresh language that's actually wake the market up with some fresh language, bring them a different perspective, and don't join the cacophony of all the other boring messages that are out there in the marketplace.
Bob, it's rare we get to deal with literally the world's best. But we appreciate you and that you came on and shared this with us. And we encourage every one of our, weekly we touch about 8,000 people. Bob, I just hope they've heard you, particularly the PS organizations that need to step up and be something different so they can run these complex, but also every firm that is not just Google. No offense to Google, they're a client, but they need to have their clear message, and the 4 steps to get there are very meaningful. So thank you very much, Bob.
Well, thank you. And I only know one thing: positioning. Very narrow expertise, but
Like you said, hey, everybody
you have
else
your
is in the
corner.
other side of the room. Your corner is positioning.
don't ask me about anything else. But I do know that the power of positioning. I've seen the impact it's made on accelerating growth levels and getting the employees excited about their company and really building category leadership and valuation. So I'm a firm believer in the power of positioning and particularly its impact from a CEO perspective on it can make on the lives of not only employees, but also the customers and in our market in general. So keep bringing it.
Thanks, buddy. Take
Thanks,
care.
Bob.
Have a great day. Wow. I just love being around Bob. And all the stuff about positioning, true. And not dissimilar to the way we help people position in consulting and PS firms. But the thing that is most important for our readers is...
Or listeners.
Yes. If you're auditory.
Some might read the transcripts, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm going to go with listeners. Anyway, the thing most important is your PS. You need to encourage your business that you work in. You need to understand that there's this transition, and you need to be ahead of it and participating with it. And boy, that's good news for people who want to run a meaningful business, not just an implementation business.
Yes, he said it. There are going to be, and no surprise, but there are going to be winners and there are going to be a lot of losers in this shift to a post-land grab world where the bulk of the focus and attention is running those three business models, and it's not just the acquisition one, it is on expansion and the renewal aspects of it. And to Bob's point, professional services has to play a critical role in driving customer success, outcomes, which will drive renewals, and expanding the portfolio of ways that we help solve the big, hairy problem, multi-million-dollar problem that they know us for.
Yeah, and those problems can't be solved without PS. I'll even go as far as to say PS is the sticky part, right? And if you don't take advantage of that and make that different, someone else in your market will.
Yeah, it is... Bob doesn't like the word, but it is the agile part of your business, right? Because I mean, truly,
Bob's right. They overuse words,
right? But your software can only evolve so fast. Your ability for that to impact things can only change so quickly. But if you are owning a topic and owning a problem, the services that you can offer wrapped around everything else that you do
to change that outcome.
Can very quickly pivot to meet the market's needs so that you can continue to add value to them.
And you get paid for it. Which is the amazing thing. So, encourage your senior leadership that may not understand this to listen to this and get with. You can become the sticky part of it. You get paid for solving the client's problem, and they're not going to get rid of your software if you're solving problems.
Yep. So thank you, Bob. For everybody that was listening out there, check Bob out if you're on this topic at all, Bob and his firm with Firebrick. And connect with Dean or I if you have any thoughts, questions, or have some suggestions for some future guests. Also, you can always email us at podcast@consultantsway.com. Thanks, everybody.